Amena Bakr, Senior Research Analyst at Energy Intelligence. Amena, your thoughts at the OPEC Plus decision overnight. Is it enough?
Good morning, Sean, and thanks for that. Well, it didn't impact prices that much. We're seeing some small movement in the price. Uh, Delaying the decision by a couple of months does buy the group a little bit more time. And we know in general, Sean, if we look at the balances, just on the fundamental side, at least by our estimate at Energy Intelligence, we do see a deficit in the second half of this year that's averaging 1.75 million barrels. So this market is tight. So these prices that are not necessarily reacting to fundamentals, there are other factors. I mean, traders are spooked about the macroeconomics, the slower manufacturing data coming out of China, the US. You have the US elections coming up. Perhaps there's interest in keeping these prices at a lower level. So by delaying this decision by a couple of months does buy the group time. But will that translate into the price? I mean, that kind of remains to be seen. Prices have been moving almost counterintuitively, I would say, even with the huge outage we've seen out of Libya, 70% of production off. Traditionally, that would spike prices, but we didn't see that movement at all. The geopolitical tension has no impact on the price as well. But overall, I mean, just something to watch very closely, Sean, is the compensation cuts, because these compensation cuts by Kazakhstan, Iraq, and Russia, the new schedule that was sent to OPEC, that's going to cushion any increment coming in. So when the group decides to bring back 181,000 barrels in December, with the compensation cuts, let's assume 100% compliance, the actual net supply into the market is 17,000 barrels, which is, you have to put things into context, which isn't a lot of supply. So this is what the market needs to be focused on.
I wanted to I mean, one of the things I think we're all searching for as we come out of the summer is, what is the North Star direction of the market? I mean, what are we looking at that will say, oh yeah, that will give us direction? Obviously, we're seeing this dramatically drop. And if you want to go back to the early days of April when we were above $90 and we're down $20 from there. But in the last sort of coming out of summer, this is a sort of an extra level of decline. We've hit the year-to-date lows. What's OPEC looking at for its guidance? I mean, typically it's looked at inventories to be at 5-year averages. We're seeing inventories at low levels, at 1-year lows now, as reported by the EIA last week. What's their North Star other than price?
Good question, Sean. I think there are a number of variables here, but mainly I think the wild card for this year has been demand and the lack of trust over this future demand. And I think it's the picture is muddied even more by these extreme forecasts that we're seeing from various agencies, whether the IEA predicting 1 million, 1.1 million barrels a day of growth, and you have, on the other hand, OPEC's very bullish forecast of now 2.1. So all of this is, kind of not giving a clear picture of what's happening. And on the ground, I mean, if you talk to traders or bankers, whoever, I mean, there are still a lot of concerns over how demand will pan out. So yes, yeah, for sure. I mean, OPEC does look at stock levels, but as I mentioned before, I mean, the fundamentals in this market are not necessarily being reflected by the price. It's more, I feel it's more sentiment driven, and right now there's a lot of this negative sentiment in the market.
Amena, OPEC Plus and OPEC obviously have been formidable stewards of the oil market since the traumatic days, early days of I mean, you could go back further perhaps, but at least in this current period, since the traumatic early days of COVID, global demand fell through the floor and they had to adapt and make a whopping, I think it was 10 million barrel a day cut or something to that effect. I mean, it's been a dramatic journey and they've navigated impressively under the stewardship of the Saudi energy minister, and always seem to have a muscular deck of cards, a muscular set of cards in their hand to play. It seems now that perhaps that's not the case, that they don't, under these market conditions, weakening demand, ample supply. It's one of those moments in which OPEC's cards are limited. Your thoughts on that outlook?
Well, their cards have always been shown to, I mean, they have the power over controlling the production side of things. So their market management really revolves around that. But I would argue that it's evolved beyond that. I mean, since the time, I mean, if we look back from OPEC just being a limited group and then evolving to include non-OPEC member, primarily Russia, and becoming OPEC plus, having all these other members join. And they're managing the market these days with not just setting policy, but through very complex messaging too, which isn't easy. I mean, we're in kind of unprecedented times here. Since COVID, we've seen, I mean, as you mentioned, demand dropped drastically. We had never seen that before. Oil prices went to negative. We had never seen that before. Right now, we're in an environment where it's a very, very, very tricky market to manage. But I still believe that by them taking a very cautious approach, making sure that compliance stays high, mind you, having all these members and complying to a very high degree is very difficult. It isn't easy to guide all of these numbers and have
Are there any more? Are there any more of those catch-up cuts that people haven't made? You mentioned Iraq and Kazakhstan at the beginning. Are there any more of those in the bucket that they could call upon, or is that it now?
Those are the ones for now. So it's Iraq, Kazakhstan, and Russia. Of course, I mean, as time goes on, there might be others that would join the list, but those are the primary ones, and they've resubmitted this schedule. They're coming along under a lot of pressure by all members of the group to comply. So, yeah, let's wait and see and how their results look.